Hello, I'm Patrick Pacheco. Welcome to Theater All the Moving Parts and a fascinating discussion on Here Lies Love, the new disco-immersive David Byrne Fatboy Slim musical. First, I'm joined by cast members Jose Llana, who plays Ferdinand Marcos, Arielle Jacobs as First Lady Imelda Marcos, and Jasmine Forsberg, her alter ego Maria Luisa. Then I speak with the show's Filipino-born and Tony-winning costume designer, Clint Ramos, who is also one of the show's lead producers. Welcome, Arielle, Jasmine, and Jose. We should probably say at the outset that Here Lies Love is about the stormy romance between the Filipino people and Ferdinand and Imelda Marcos, who ruled the country from 1965 to 1986 until, because of their graft and corruption, they were forced out. Obviously, this is a fictional account because it's a musical set to a disco beat. In terms of the research that you did for the roles that you were about to play, what struck you, if there was anything in particular that gave you a gateway to who that character, historical character, was? Let's start with you, Arielle.
In researching, I realized that she always felt like she was doing the right thing. She always believed that she was showering her country with love, that she was being an act of service. And she called herself the mother of the country. It was very important for her to mother the country and to feel like she was cradling them while also lifting them up. And for me, in my research, I learned that she had a mother who was very sick, who was not very present, and who died very young. And I think that was a gateway for me to realize that she didn't have a mother figure growing up, and so she felt like it was her responsibility to become that for her people.
Jasmine, obviously you play Maria Luisa, who is Imelda's alter ego.
Yes, inner voice of sorts.
The inner voice, the angel of vengeance.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Timbers.
What struck you in doing your research?
Well, you had said earlier, this is a fictional account, but something that I loved about learning about David Byrne's process when he was forming this show is that he took everything from primary sources. Every single detail in the show was a first-hand account that was infused into this. And so, in an artistic way, something that I have taken into account as Imelda's inner voice is that society oftentimes doesn't want to see female leaders because they are so, women can be seen as emotional people. I mean, from a biological standpoint, they're the ones who have children, and so they're designed to take care of other souls, of other creatures. But I just find it so fascinating that this character was written to give the audience an inside look at what Imelda's actually experiencing, because as a political leader, as a woman in power, she's not necessarily supposed to show those sides of herself to the public. So
that's interesting, and you are that freedom.
Yeah, I'm that freedom.
Maria Luisa is one voice in my head, but in the same moment on stage, I might be tapping into a different stream of emotions. And so you can see both of them at the same time.
Right.
And
Humans are complex creatures. Imelda Marcos, complex creature.
And Jose, Ferdinand Marcos was also a complex creature.
Oh, was he? I didn't have to go far for my research. First of all, the foundation of everything that I used to dive into the show was my own family history. Like I was born in martial law in the Philippines. My mom and dad were the student activists that we depict in our show. They were big anti-Marcos activists in the Philippines. Marcos was the reason we left the Philippines in 1979. I was 3 years old. My sister was 4. And we were a part of the expat Filipino-American community here in America that was watching everything go down in the Philippines and safely in our suburban Springfield, Virginia homes, and I knew what Marcos was to a lot of people in my country and my family in particular. When I was tasked with creating a personification of him on stage, then I dove into some more research about, his history and his family.
He considered himself a man of destiny.
He had this kind of an absolutely narcissistic kind of like need for power. And when he was elected in a landslide victory, he was obsessed with holding on to
that power.
And I think to further the thought on that, in my research too, I didn't even have to look. I stopped researching him and started researching contemporary dictators and contemporary world leaders who are obsessed with power and don't want to let go. Election deniers and attacking, countries adjacent to them. So it's the same story over and over again, which is what makes our show even more relevant today.
Early on, you sing A Perfect Hand.
Lady understands that the king and the queen of hearts could be a perfect hand.
Majority of the lyrics, I believe, comes from this historical record of what these characters actually said.
He's looking for his perfect partner that he could pair up with to become the perfect running mate to elevate him. And in that time period, obviously too, in the time of JFK and Jackie, where a charismatic leader needed just as a charismatic, if not more charismatic wife to create the picture of a perfect Camelot for the Philippines.
Both of you obviously have Filipino roots. Yeah, I think both of your maternal line is Filipino. In looking back, in what way did being a part of this show make you proud to be Pinoy?
Yeah, I think this show is giving me an opportunity to connect to my family's history and to live out the dreams of my grandfather. My grandfather was born in the Philippines when it was still an American colony, and he fought for the U.S. in World War II as a Philippine scout. At the time, the U.S. promised those Philippine scouts that they would be able to have entry into the U.S. and become U.S. citizens. But then after World War II ended, that promise fell through. So my grandfather, he actually wrote to different U.S. senators over the course of 13 years, every single week. Eventually, after years of diligence, there was a new Immigration Act passed in 1965 that allowed more immigrants from different countries to come to the U.S. And my family was the first to come from the Philippines under that new law. And because of him, I'm here and I get to be on stage and for the first time in my life playing a Filipino and telling this Filipino history and telling this story. I feel like I'm somehow completing a circle.
I know that when my number's up, when I am called by God above, don't have my name inscribed into the stone. Just say, here lies love.
And I'm shining a light back to where we came from.
Tell us his name.
Julio Sorio. Actually, he is still alive, and a few years back, the U.S. gave him a U.S. Congressional Gold Medal
Nice.
for being a Philippine scout.
Great.
And
That's a great story.
actually, the senator went to his house to present it and apologized on behalf of America
Arielle,
for not fulfilling their promise.
that's
Well, I'm
amazing.
glad we
Wow, that's amazing. I didn't know that.
talk
I didn't
about
know that.
reparations.
Yeah.
Jasmine, your connection.
In a similar scope, I think this being a part of this show is giving me a connection to the culture in a way that I've never experienced, but also with my Lolo, with my grandpa. He's no longer with us, but I remember so vividly. Any Filipino party you go to, you don't really know who's your family because everybody's family.
Everyone's tita, everyone's tito, right?
But also, at every party, whether it's a graduation party, a holiday party, the Magic Sing is coming out, the karaoke Magic Sing, which is
The Magic Sing.
And I vividly remember my Lolo taking out the Magic Sing and singing New York, New York. And I am somebody who is mixed race. I'm not all Filipino. It does come from my
Part
mom.
Swedish, I think.
Yes,
right?
part
From
Swedish,
your-
German, Polish.
Yeah.
And something that I learned in college is that I was told by a mentor, your parents didn't just show up with 50% of your culture and say, that's it, you're just getting 50. They showed up with 100% of themselves. So I'm 100% Filipino.
Amen.
I'm 100% Swedish, German, Polish. And it feels amazing to be able to really step into this power and claim this identity as a part of this
Absolutely.
show and just be fully myself and tell this story.
Since your parents were anti-Marcos activists and chose to leave rather than stay and fight, whatever. And you mentioned obviously that you were a martial law baby, which meant that Marcos had instituted, I think, 10 years of martial law, if not 11. What did you find that you had to, in order to play Ferdinand Marcos, what did you have to find and admire about him?
When you see a politician who is just purely intelligent and energetic and someone who truly looks like they know what they're doing, it's seductive, right? It's like, oh, this guy, I could follow this woman, I could follow this man. Like, they're someone who I really want to trust. And I think, I always tell people that's our job for the first half of the show, is to seduce this audience, is to make them love us.
Who's got a secret and who's feeling bold? It's a winning combination.
I think we do a good job. I think, we're helped with some really great songs and some really, some good choreography. But I think that, to me, every night is our goal, is my goal. I'll speak for myself, is that my goal is to seduce this audience to love me and to love us. So then when we turn on them, it hurts that much more.
Well, part of the problem, or part of the challenge of your roles and playing your roles, is the fact that you have to wend your way through a crowd of standees, as well as moving through as if though they are part of the Filipino population. What does the director, Alex Timbers, possibly say to you in terms of how much you interact with them and how much you stay within the character?
There was a lot of talk in rehearsals about figuring out what those moments were. Where were we going to, where is the story call for a connection with the people that are on the dance floor or in the mezzanines? And where are they more of observers in the story? And so it was definitely considered, and we kind of explored from song to song and from moment to moment, and even within certain songs, like the beginning of Star and Slave, after Imelda discovers the affair, starts in one kind of a way where I'm ignoring the audience and I'm just reliving this moment about a dream that I had, and I'm in it. And then there's a shift, and I walk down the steps through the audience, and I connect with the people, looking at them, touching them, shaking their hands, and the feeling that Imelda then is amongst the people after she decides to give her life to serving them. Finding the wave of that throughout the whole show was very intentional.
You mentioned obviously the affair, the lurid, very public humiliation that Imelda had to endure because of Ferdinand's affair with Dovey Beam, an American starlet.
Yeah.
And it's at that point when she decides, I'm going to serve the people, as you said, Star and Slave, which is a very, it's one of the peaks of the entire musical. I gather that that is when you are most seductive to the audience.
Oh, I would say it's right after that, potentially, because right after Star and Slave is the song Please Don't. And that's where Imelda is in her full
charm.
Full
charm
power,
offensive.
full come dance with me.
Please don't let them look down on us. Please don't.
I love this song because Alex Timbers, our director, said to me, I want you to imagine that in this song, Imelda is giving her masterclass. This is how you do it.
Please don't. Like they used to do to me.
A woman knows.
Woman knows.
Please don't look down on us is basically that entire lyric. And Jasmine, it's actually after the Dovey Beam, I suppose, or before that first of all, Imelda takes pills.
Yes.
Uppers, downers, to make her cope with the new role that she's thrust into. And there's Maria Luisa.
Yes, Maria Luisa, she first appears in our show on Ferdinand and Imelda's political campaign trail. Right. And it's after their honeymoon when Imelda first takes these pills. And I believe intentionally that's when Maria Luisa appears as this figment of Imelda's imagination, this alter ego of sorts, where she bolsters confidence while Imelda's on the campaign trail, because Imelda's a small town girl. She's never been doing things like this, and she's been cast in this role to be this perfect partner for Ferdinand. And it's fascinating to see how Maria Luisa acts in service to give confidence to Imelda, but also to taunt her in that moment of men will do anything. There's a mixture of, the lyric is, there's nothing you can do to me. And there's a part of me that thinks that that's Maria Luisa channeling this ultimate confidence and saying, I got this. I'm going to use this situation, this rage, this energy to my advantage.
That moment of please don't look down on us is both personal when it comes to the historical figures in the show, but it's also global.
Yes.
Don't look down on us Filipinos, because we've been a colonial power that has been oppressed for centuries. What is the role of shame in the way she shaped her life?
One of the moments in our show that really reveals that is the after Please Don't that goes into Solano Avenue. And it's after Estrella has given this interview.
This is Estrella, her childhood friend,
Yeah.
who is telling the truth of her humble beginnings, which, like Ferdinand, she wants to erase and
Correct.
create her own myth.
Correct. And they have a confrontation. And Estrella says, "What? I just told the truth." And Imelda knows at that point two things. She knows that in order to be accepted into these higher societies that she wanted to be accepted into, that she has to pretend that she was always at this higher level of society. And number two, she knows that Ferdinand married her because he thought she came from this higher level of society.
Right.
If that truth came out, she thought her marriage was going to be at stake.
Compromised.
Yeah. So there is a level of shame of, wanting to hide.
That's
that.
attached to her actual power.
Correct.
And quickly, were the Blue ladies that you referred to earlier, Jasmine, were the Blue ladies aristocratic or were they from middle class backgrounds?
Aristocratic.
Oh,
They were
They were
the wives and
of-
daughters of all the politicians and wealthy
Shades of
people.
Evita there.
Absolutely. I mean, if I may add my two
Yes,
cents
go
too
ahead.
about, we have a song in the show, one of the election songs called Pretty Face, and it's a genius lyric, and it's about putting on a good front and putting on, a pretty face, no matter what the truth is underneath. Let's put on a pretty face.
We'll show the whole wide world that we have a pretty face.
Pretty face, pretty face, have we?
There's something that runs in that in Filipino culture.
Yeah.
Because we are the masters of assimilation. We are a country that has been colonized so many times that, not dissimilar to kind of that British keep calm and carry on attitude. Ours is, put on a pretty face and let's pretend it'll all work itself out. Maybe, hopefully, And I think a lot of what fueled a lot of the greed that Imelda had was that she was building all of these massive projects in the Philippines so that we could look good to the rest of the world. Could we afford it? Could the Filipino people afford it? Not necessarily, but they'll find the money somehow. And so that it looks amazing. Like she built these fortresses that were testaments of power and fortune, and the country was starving.
It's that fascist architecture. Jasmine, you earlier mentioned, obviously, what she had to deal with as a woman. First, her feminine wiles in seducing whoever she had to seduce, Ferdinand in this case. And then actually having to be the power in a world led by male global leaders. To what extent do you find that Imelda was using her feminine wiles, and to what extent could she be considered a feminist?
Ooh, that's quite a question.
My perception of Imelda is that she knows that she is a beautiful woman and she can use these things to her advantage in a world, especially at that time, run by men. And so there is a strong part of me that believes that she intentionally toyed with these facets of her, whether it was her figure, whether it was her fashion, the 3,000 pairs of shoes that we found later in life, to climb the ladder. But then also, wow, I've never thought of her as the feminist perspective.
Yeah.
That was one of her superpowers, that all these world leaders constantly underestimated her and did not think she was as smart as she was, but she was very smart. And
Rose to the occasion.
She basically, and we're talking for you, but Arielle, it's your part. You tell
Yeah. In what way, if at all, do you think of her as a feminist?
Well, her belief in her equality with the men around her made her more of the mindset of a feminist. However, the way that she manipulated people had a lot to do with gaining their sympathy and gaining their pity, and working also with her sexuality. And you know, I think I told you the story about the pageant.
Yes,
the beauty
please
pageant.
tell us.
Yes, so in our show, in Here Lies Love, Imelda wins the beauty pageant. But in real life, she did not.
the Manila one.
Yeah.
Right.
She did not win the beauty pageant. So she lost, and she was so distraught that she went to go see the mayor, and she was supposed to have a friend with her, but then she couldn't come, so she went by herself, which was unheard of at the time. She demanded a meeting with the mayor. She sat down with him in a closed room, just the two of them, and she won his sympathy, and he went back to the people running the pageant and said, there needs to be a recount. And so he made this recount happen. She still lost. But he felt so bad for her that he created a secondary title.
Created a title for her.
And he called her the Muse of Manila.
Hilarious.
It's hilarious and somewhat
And a
admirable.
little sadistic.
And a
yeah.
little, yes.
Yeah.
But having that, you know, she learned at a very young age that she could use her beauty and her acting to create a power dynamic and to get people to change things to help her.
Absolutely.
I don't call that feminism,
Okay.
Interesting.
because you're not then coming to it as an equal person asking for respect. That's
Right.
different.
Right. Her powers of manipulation were not. She used her feminism for that,
Right.
but I would not. You're right. I wouldn't call it feminism because she wasn't looking out to help other women either. She
Right.
was-
It was for herself.
And clothes are power. And Clint Ramos has
yeah.
some
Nice segue.
kick-ass costumes for all of you.
Absolutely.
But there is one, the black armor. I think of it as like black armor, and also sunglasses.
Oh, I love it. I also am so hot because it's like
leather,
so
right?
many layers of,
Yeah.
it's like pleather. It's like doesn't breathe. But I love the turno sleeves. And there's so many geometric shapes across it does feel like armor. There's also the sunglasses that, for me, I love what it represents because I'm able to put on the sunglasses, but I used to have this moment in 1081, you know, where Imelda crosses the very front of the mezzanine in a slow motion way.
1081 is when he institutes martial law.
Yes. Proclamation 81. 1081.
And I used to have a moment where I would have a small smile on my face, like, look what we did. But then Alex Timbers, our director, said, I like the choice, but tone it down a little bit and make it a very slight smile, more like a mask, more like an impenetrable mask, like everything's fine. And I think the sunglasses allow that. I mean, they are a representation of you're masking what's going on underneath.
You're making that walk with 70,000 people imprisoned and 3,200 people killed. And that's the walk that you make. Jasmine, when you put on, you called it the turno, that gorgeous traditional dress of the Filipino
butterfly coat.
woman or
Butterfly sleeves.
Filipina woman?
Filipina.
Filipina women. How does that make you feel?
The only time I get to wear a terno dress is in this one number, Poor Me, when the blue ladies come out, and there are five of us in the pit area and others in the mezzanine areas on our satellite stages. And Alex Timbers said, "Iron butterfly." So it is power, it is elevation, it is. I mean, a butterfly is such a delicate creature, and yet here we are being iron butterflies. So this idea of strong female lead.
That was the term that people called Imelda Marcos.
Yes, right,
The iron butterfly.
right.
Yeah, I feel quite powerful when I put it on. Thank you, Clint Ramos.
Obviously, you've mentioned the director. Obviously, you mentioned David Byrne and Fatboy Slim, the director Alex Timbers. Tell me again the choreographers.
Annie B. Parson.
Annie B. Parson.
Yeah, who does terrific, extraordinary work. Obviously, non-AAPI artists. Did they come to you from not a defensive crouch, but wanting to learn and make sure that as non-AAPI artists, they were on the right track and that they could have been easily criticized?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'll speak
Yes,
for someone
please.
who's been there from the first workshop. I mean, I was part of the first workshop in 2011. And, like I said, having been in a family with anti-Marcos supporters, anti-Marcos activists, from day one, I walked into that room and I said, this is my family history. You've hired me to play this president, but I just want you to know I'm not going to be a part of something that's going, because I didn't know, we hadn't formed the piece yet at that point, and they had things in their mind. But from day one, David said, I've done all this research and I want to tell the story of the Filipino people in this really fun way. And they used every resource they possibly could, including my family history. And they let me talk during rehearsal and say, I think my parents did this and my parents did that. And Peter Negrini, who did all the projections for us, he had 12 years to sort of research and delve, and the internet's only gotten bigger and more and deeper. And he's able to really pick out specific images that really tell the story of the Filipino history. The biggest shift in this production, as opposed to the public theater productions we did 10 years ago, and even the Seattle and the London productions, is that there are more Filipinos on the lead producing team making decisions and making sure that the story is being told in an authentic way.
Last one, how has participating in this show changed you?
I think that this show has deepened my connection to my culture and has shown me that there is more possible on Broadway, that there's more possible in storytelling and in what can be created for the experience of the artist and the audience. And I'm excited for what that means.
Jasmine?
Being a part of this show has reminded me that something as simple as culture, I mean, your ethnicity is in your DNA, and yet culture is so much deeper than that. And yet DNA is the deepest you can go. And it is one of the quickest ways that you can bond with a company and create a family, a familia, like what we have. And it's so special, and I hope that we can continue finding ways to tell stories so everybody feels like they can be represented on stage.
I stand up a lot taller, and I take up a lot more space as a Filipino American.
Wonderful. And you've been able to convey that not only to the Filipino community, the Pinoy community in this diaspora around the world and in this country and in the Philippines. You've been able to convey that. So I think they're all standing a little taller
I hope
because because Here Lies Love is at the Broadway Theater. So congratulations. Thank you so much for an illuminating conversation that just scratched the surface.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much for joining.
Thanks for having us.
We're taking a short break. When we return, I talk with Tony winner Clint Ramos about why he chose to make his producing debut, as well as create the stunning costumes for the show. We are back. I'm now with Clint Ramos, who is a Filipino-born lead producer of Here Lies Love. He has used his background as well as his Tony-winning talents as a costume designer to bring an emotional authenticity to a complex and at times controversial work of art. Welcome, Clint. I should say welcome back. You were our second interviewee for Theater All the Moving Parts.
Yes, hi Patrick. Yes, I'm glad to be back.
And I'm glad to have you back at a time when Here Lies Love is such an exciting addition to this Broadway season. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Please don't let them look down on us.
What is intrinsic, Clint, in the Filipino culture which is reflected in Here Lies Love. In other words, what is Filipino-ness to you?
The thing that I could really think of is complexity, and with that multiplicity, we're spread all over the world, and a lot of us are actually outside of the motherland, and so with that, and with sort of our history, our colonial history, it's inevitable that we have these layers of complexity that are intrinsic, both to our own identities, but also to the way we tell story. The lived experiences of Filipino are pretty ironic. It is all of these layers, but I think underneath that is joy, joy from that is really in our DNA, and this joy reflected through storytelling, through celebration,
Joy and irony are definitely reflected in Here Lies Love.
That's right. It's not that we actually turn our backs on the hard things in life, right? There's always this kind of like big thing when foreigners come to the Philippines, like, oh God, these people smile. There's almost like a plastered smile on Filipinos, they say, right? But when you look at our colonial history, you have over 350 years of oppression from Spain, and then another 50 years from America. Those layers, and I heard this, my friend Bea Valdez from Vogue Philippines said this to me, those layers are loud. They're really, really loud.
What is it that Americans are naive about the Philippines?
Well, I think America is naive about its imperialist history, I think. We talk so much about race in this country, but we cannot talk about racism if we can't talk about imperialism.
What can they take away from Here Lies Love about that specifically?
When you look at the Philippines, since we've been granted independence by America in the late 1940s, it's a really young democracy. Here Lies Love is really a reflection on democracy making, and how fragile it is, right? And how and the branding of that specific democracy. Right? Which kind of democracy are we talking about? Because if America came to these islands, right, with a particular brand of democracy and started to clothe the natives of that island with this concept that, with no regard to fit or function or propriety.
Which often happens,
and it still happens, right? What does that do to a nation, to a group of people, right? And for the Philippines, I think one of the things that it created was a culture of confusion.
Was it a confusion that the Marcoses were able to take advantage of?
Absolutely. There has been no Philippine election post the American occupation that the Americans have not meddled with, right? And we always say it was 350 years in the convent and 50 years in Hollywood. That's how we explain sort of the modern Filipino psyche, right? And again, these are different points. There are a lot of points of view about this, but I think the Marcoses really looked at that as fertile ground, right, to create stories and to create myths around them, right? There is a myth, a creation myth in the Philippines called Malakas and Maganda. Malakas means strong, and Maganda means beautiful, right?
And there's a myth about Imelda, obviously, but that myth-making went into the politics, obviously,
from the very
Marcos.
beginning. She was the beauty and he was the strong man, right? And hence they became the creator of the nation, the mother and father of the nation. They birthed this, right? And I remember in elementary school, I was a martial baby, and so we were taught this myth, right? Or this myth was resurfaced.
As a 13-year-old, you went to the Malacanang Palace and met Imelda Marcos.
Yeah, I encountered her while she was pinning a medal on a bunch of students, and including me. And I recall it now as, I have a very sort of conflicted emotional memory of it. The physical memory was that she smelled good, and that she seemed benevolent, But what I noticed around her was that everybody was scurrying around, and I suppose that's what power is, right? Like the behaviors really don't change, but the person with the most power can afford or has the privilege to be benevolent, right? Or where everyone around them is actually operating on fear.
As a young teenager who was to go into the arts as a
Right.
costume designer, as a designer, and also eventually to be gay, were you dazzled by the glamour, blinded by the glamour?
I don't know if I was blinded by the glamour. I was aware of it, right? Because Imelda had become sort of, through this, a 21-year protracted rule really meant that you could manipulate culture,
Yeah.
right? And part of the culture when I was growing up was that women, including my mother, my aunts, and everybody, sort of really looked up to what Imelda was doing style-wise, and she had the means to hire couturiers in Paris and also really champion the national dress. The traditional dress for women is called the terno.
The
Right.
tailor with the butterfly sleeve?
With the butterfly sleeve.
The famous butterfly sleeve.
Yeah.
So obviously you were more than cognizant of it as a costume designer.
Yeah.
But when you came to design the costumes for this, how did you look at the traditional, how did you theatricalize the traditional dress of the Philippines?
Part of it was scale, right? And really looking at how the sleeve kind of became harder and harder and harder because it's really severe. Again, it's traced back to Western sources, right? Like I think what happened in the Philippines was, through the Spanish occupation, Western style was used on indigenous materials, right? And so the sleeve really is sourced from, I would say, an antebellum or like an 1830s, 1840s Biedermeier sleeve that was pressed. And they could press it really hard because it was usually done out of banana leaves or pineapple leaves, which were also imported by the Spaniards to the Philippines, right?
Forgive me, but the Biedermeier sleeve was an American or Western
A Western influence.
A Western influence.
Yeah. It was a big poofy sleeve. And what I think over the decades in the 19th century, they just pressed and kept on pressing it until it became this flat sleeve,
Very hard. as
Very
you said.
hard,
And harder and harder.
And harder and harder.
And that's not a metaphor for the iron butterfly,
I don't
is
know,
it?
is it? I mean, you could, yes, I suppose, yes. I mean, that's sort of the idea, right? But I also really wanted to kind of, theatricalize that journey, right? So when they were first elected, she's in this pink Jackie O suit, right? That never happened in history. But I wanted to connect those kind of, in a way, bridge sort of the American psyche of what a promising political couple would be, the thing about Here Lies Love is that Imelda as the character needs to win you over in order for her to betray you, and that betrayal is crucial. So, and I think that's what a lot of folks who talk about the musical glorifying Imelda don't get.
I want to go back a little bit to 2014 because
Yes.
you've been involved from the beginning.
Yes.
In a musical by David and Fatboy Slim
Yes.
and Alex Timbers,
Yes.
all white, non-Asian men.
Yes.
What was crucial to you?
It's really exploring democracy and particularly American democracy, right? And what we're seeing on stage in those 90 minutes gets replicated in this country, in every election cycle.
There are many ways to win a game, but skill is not enough.
And so to me, that was important. But then I said, why is this important? Right? And as a Filipino, I can only speak from my own identity. Nothing happens in a vacuum, right? The Marcos leadership, all the way up to the revolution, those were global events.
Yes, absolutely. We were captivated by the
Correct.
people power movement.
You know, the world was watching. So in a lot of ways, yes, it is a Filipino story, but it is also a global story. We're talking about a global story here. As a matter of fact, that particular revolution was a
The People's Power Revolution.
People's Power Revolution, a peaceful revolution that happened in 4 days, had become a template for all the revolutions that happened in the late 80s and the 90s, including, you know, the Baltics, the singing revolution of Czechoslovakia, you know, Poland's revolution, as a matter of fact, they said we are patterning it, and any sort of peaceful revolution that happened.
So does that take the edge off of cultural appropriation? Because David Byrne has been very outspoken by saying, I believe that as an artist, I can write about anything. I'm paraphrasing and generalizing here, but he's been fairly outspoken about saying, I believe that I could write about the Philippines, I could write about, you know, perhaps an African history, Uganda or whatever. Do you agree with that?
There is a fine line between cultural appropriation and culture. Patrick, I wore pajamas last night to bed.
I love
Which
that
is
you're
a-
telling us your rituals.
You know, this is I literally wore something that was of Indian Turkish extraction. I suppose the question is, as culture makers, what is our responsibility, right? And I know for David, in having had these like really deep conversations with him, the words that the characters are speaking in the musical are not, he didn't write those words.
Yes.
Those were words that were spoken by Filipinos. And what's beautiful about this all Filipino cast on Broadway right now is that those words have finally found their way home.
Is it a sin to love too much? Is it a sin to care? I do it all for you.
They are now living in Filipino bodies. Those songs are coming out of Filipino throats. And in a large way, for this generation of actors that are on stage doing the show every night, it is a homecoming.
Some of those words, obviously, are Imelda's word.
Right.
And she is a fascinating,
Yes.
absolutely
Yes, yeah.
fascinating character, as fascinating as Evita Peron, to which this musical
I would even say more.
has been compared.
Yes.
What did you think of Evita, the musical?
Oh gosh, this is one of those hard questions. I think it's a musical device, right? I think it's interesting. I think it is a milestone in musical theater that tries to examine a very complex character, right? In a large way, it succeeds, right? But there are also questions around complexity, right? And how we render particular characters. You know, the musical gets compared to Evita a lot, right? Just because of the nature of two first ladies in dictatorships, right?
Who came from threadbare circumstances.
Right,
Relatively
from
threadbare.
mundane circumstances,
Yeah.
right?
There's only one man who can lead any workers' regime. He lives for your problems, he shares your ideals and your dreams.
I would say, for me, the more appropriate comp would probably be Cabaret. Because you are invited to an event that seems to be celebratory. Right. But what you walk out with is something different, something, a lesson.
Can young Filipinos take the same pride in Here Lies Love, either diaspora or in the Philippines itself?
It's a marked cultural event. There are many things to be proud of, right? One is that it is an all-Filipino company on Broadway, right? And it is being told responsibly. And at the sort of outer shell of it are these core Filipino producers, right?
We should name them. Jose Antonio Vargas.
So Antonio Vargas is a lead producer with me, and you know, Lea Salonga is a co-producer, Joe Coy, Gabby Wilson, who goes by her, and a phalanx of Filipinos, you know, who basically are taking care of this property, right, and making sure that it is as responsible as it could possibly be, right? Listen, the show could have happened without us. right? And these opportunities for me never are, as the song says, they're never drawn in straight lines, right? So when you see your story being told in this manner, and it may not be directly coming from us, it is only sort of responsible for us to say, hey, we need to get involved because this is our story. And at every decision this musical has made and bringing it to Broadway, a Filipino has been on that table.
And that makes all the difference in the...
Absolutely. No decision made in the musical, marketing, everything, has been made without a Filipino or Filipinos, on the table.
Just getting back to Imelda's young beginnings.
Yes.
As a beauty queen, as someone who was born, I think, in middle class and then lost it in a way and came
Correct.
down to it.
There was sort of an effort to cover up her beginnings, right? Just by,
Right.
I suppose it's really about this, our desire to dehumanize our leaders. They're somehow not allowed to be human. Right. And that also happens in reverse. When we look at leaders who have gone astray, right? Leaders who have been corrupted by power, right? There's also a tendency for us to dehumanize them and make them into these monsters, right? We know that these leaders are little girls first. They join beauty contests. They dream of marrying well, and in a protracted 21-year rule, these personal issues will play out on a global scale, right, and affect so many people. So for me, shame really and pride play deeply into that, right? And when we look at our own leaders, even in the last sort of like decade, right? Where do we, as Americans now, where do we as Americans hold shame and where do we hold pride, And are they always mutually exclusive, I suppose, is the question.
In 2014, when
Yes.
you started this great adventure,
Yeah.
Benigno Aquino III, the
Yes.
son of the assassinated politician who started the entire People's Revolution, was in power.
Correct.
Now it's then you went from him to Duterte, who
Yeah.
was also extremely oppressive,
Correct.
And a strong man, and to Bong Bong now.
Yes.
How did that change the musical? You started in 2014. It is now 2023, and it is on Broadway.
Yeah.
How did that span of history change the musical?
Well, I think what that has done to us as creators of this musical is really be cognizant of that, right? And how are we telling this with a larger sort of, observation on democracy making.
And global perspective.
Correct. And so to a certain extent, what you see on Broadway right now is a result of a lot of deep meditation of what could we change, what could we punctuate, without destroying sort of the theatrical DNA of the work of art. Because, Patrick, this is still a work of art.
Isn't that interesting? The same amount of time that the Philippines was under martial law.
Correct. Yeah.
10 years.
We needed that to be responsible, to feel like, hey, we have something to say here. This is not only a template, this is, for the Philippines but this is a template for the world. Look at how these leaders who come from those, banal or mundane circumstances could actually control a nation, right?
The destiny of a nation.
A destiny of a nation, and how that nation could actually take its own destiny in its own hands. So for me, listen, the third act is about the revolution.
I want to end our conversation going back to a word that you mentioned, and that is the word of irony.
Yeah.
And especially to the motor of your musical, Imelda, and the role of irony in Imeldita herself. It's amazing that the show is obviously Here Lies Love, which is what will one day grace her tombstone.
Well, she said that. We don't know if that's really going to happen, right?
Do you think it's going to happen?
I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, she said that in an interview in a documentary by Ramona Diaz, and there were so many things said in that documentary that is florid.
Florid is a good word.
Yeah.
So could you take advantage of that floridness of Imelda? It's almost like a telenovela, and
That's right.
that tips almost into, if not the florid, the lurid.
Right.
Could you take advantage of that in telling a very entertaining story?
I mean, I think we have. I think we have. It's this sort of deep. I think when you look at a character like her, right? I think the truth only comes out when you know that they actually believe what they're saying. Right, and to a certain extent, she always says. I think she was quoted as saying, "The truth is not important; perception is."
Perception is real, and the truth is not.
To me, you need to believe people when they say these things. A lot of people say, "Oh God, that's so wacky," right? But no, like she believed. She believed what she was saying. She believed she was doing it out of love. She believed that, that she was the mother of the nation. And what happens when a person who is corrupted by power believes in those things? And that to me is mind-blowing in terms of a main character, of a narrative,
Well, because it builds up a pressure. Elena Ceausescu also called herself the mother of
That's right.
Romania
That's
and ended
right.
up being hung upside down in the town square
That's
with her
right.
husband.
That's right, yeah.
But the pressure is very theatrical.
Correct. It is, what I admire about our endeavor is that it creates complicity not by, in the theatrical scape, in that container, not by volition, but whether you like it or not, you are manipulated, right? But the manipulation is intoxicating. And to me, that is what happens when we are attracted to personalities and not principles.
Intoxicating is a good word for you and your talents as a costume designer.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you very much. You've been a very, very good sport.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for joining us. We look forward to bringing you more absorbing conversations with artists and professionals as New York theater, The Fabulous Invalid, regains its invaluable place in American culture. I'm Patrick Pacheco.